we're starting our last session here, the last content session, before we go into the networking part as well. And as I mentioned, all the speakers of today and all the partners of today, the enablers, the corporate and the or among the enablers are the corporate partners, and of course also the different project partners from the different regions. They have their own dedicated networking table there, so we can mingle with them later on. But now I'm really looking forward to this session on corporate innovation, and with esteemed speakers over here. And today, this session actually is organized and will be moderated by Ty Bangalore, also one of our partners that we've been working with. And I'm really happy to see everyone here and hand over to Bangalore to Vijeta.
Thank you very much, Julian, and very illustrious panel that we have got. So I'm going to just get into the deep dive because it's all about tech, it's about innovation. And I'm sure the audience really wants to understand, okay, all this is great. It's really nice to see all these wonderful folks out here, but what's in it for us? So as the ecosystem enabler, as someone who's from the community, what I would love to do is, Maren, Jorgon, Manjunatha, and Uday, hand it over to you guys to introduce yourself the way you want to introduce yourself. But remember, this is about startups, it's about deep tech, it's about innovation. India, Germany, the bridges, and the entrepreneurs and founders want to know from each one of you, what can they gain from interacting, talking to you, and listening to your insights? So over to you. Of Maren, of course, we always say ladies first, but in your case, we insist that you start off first. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for giving me the microphone first, and greetings from Berlin. So as you said, I'm Maren. I'm actually a co-founder of an incubator here focusing on health tech, but I've been around for quite a while in the Berlin startup ecosystem, and I've seen a lot of change. I am a communicator by heart, so I actually have a marketing and communications background. And I think it shows that you can actually become an entrepreneur. It doesn't matter what you studied or what's your background, because I think there are a lot of opportunities. For the past 3.5, 4 years in my company, Startup Colors, I work with corporates but also with startups alike. And I think it's one of the most fascinating areas. But I also have to say, while we also as enablers try to bridge a gap, hopefully there will be a time when there is no gap anymore, and there will be seamless collaboration between startups and larger organizations, be it governments or established 100-year-old mid-sized companies that we have here in Germany. So it's my pleasure to also share some light into the work that I do in smart city projects, logistics projects, but also in healthcare.
Fantastic, Maren. Yes, definitely. Smart cities, healthcare, these are important ones. Coming to healthcare, Jorgon, Siemens Healthineers, we would love to hear from you, sir.
Sure. Can you hear me? Super. Yeah. So welcome everybody out there. Thanks for having me on. Quite excited to have the discussion. I think most of you hopefully will know Siemens Healthineers. We are a global medtech company that actually is headquartered in Germany and has substantial operations in India. So the bridge in our company, is already naturally inbuilt. But we're not only selling and serving our customers in India, but we also have substantial R&D manufacturing activities in India. And we've recently opened a new molecular kit device manufacturing, and we have set out in 2025 actually to substantially increase our operations in Bangalore, especially in the digital healthcare field. So within our company, the bridge is already there, but we always feel we can do better, yeah, and better on a global level means for us also to connect more to startups. So we think that with all the fantastic folks we have in our innovation teams, we can still learn from the external world, and I think almost everybody in the innovation community these days has adopted that view. And we are already working with a lot of startups. There's already a lot going on with Siemens Healthineers. But we have decided also to set up an own activity called the Technology Accelerator, which is my team within the CTO office of Siemens Healthineers. We connect startups to our businesses. So we identify startups that fit the Siemens Healthineers business. We take them to our business lines, which I think is very important. So there's an immediate connection to our businesses. And we help them address the right topics. We help them to do projects with our business lines. We we can do paid proof of concept projects, for example, and thereby establishing a strong connection between the startup community and our business lines. And of course, we also want to do that in India. So last year we have opened an own office in India, especially to connect to Indian startups. And that's why I'm enjoying talking to you today.
Thank you very much, Jürgen. You very beautifully said this. And I think what matters to the Indian startups, at least, is how can they work with you and your teams and move forward and expand on a global scale. So thank you for that. Uday, please, it's over to you, sir.
Yeah, thanks. Great to be amongst this crowd. Happy to be here. So I'm Uday. I'm part of the Robert Bosch Engineering Indian wing. I head the innovation side, which also looks into a lot of engagements with startups. I've been sort of been in a startup kind of environment all my life, right? 30 years of thing. I had my own startup way back. And as part of the organization also, my job is to create startups within the organization. We call it as new business ventures. And so therefore, there's a culture that we are inculcating to create products. Parallelly, we have our DNA ecosystem led by Hemant, which is about incubating external startups, give them wings, if I may, and mentor them, engage them, look at whether we can participate along with them or enable them to find their own journeys. So overall, that's what we are looking for. We are a large organization, but then there's fascinating stories about David and Goliath. So we are always looking for the David, so Goliath can coexist.
Thank you so much, Uday. And I must give a personal shout out as well that the Bosch DNA program is really good. I've had the privilege of interacting with your teams and also the fantastic founders and startups. Very committed, very passionate, and very well curated by your innovation team. So great going on that, Uday. It's really nice to know.
Thank you
now
so
the
much.
fact, yes. And Uday, you're also encouraging people within Bosch also to take up some, innovation projects, entrepreneur projects. Yes. So that's wonderful. Thank you.
That's true. That's true. Thank you so much. We have a good team.
Thank you, Uday. And Mr. Manjunatha, Infosys, we would love to hear more because you are doing so much of work, but I think we want to get that message out to the audience out here. Please go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Sucheta, and thanks for giving this opportunity to be present along with these excellent panelists and talk to this audience. I am Manjunath. I am part of the Infosys R&D unit called IGSW2021, and I lead the Infosys Innovation Network program, which is about creating an ecosystem of startups to orchestrate innovation for our clients and for Infosys. And we will obviously talk more about the program and how we are enabling the startups to become successful during the course of today's session. But in terms of the Germany's Connect itself, I think we have large partnerships and large clients in Germany. I think it must be the second or third largest market for us. We have an innovation hub in Düsseldorf that we set up, I think, a little over 2-3 years ago. So we have quite an amount of activity happening in the local markets with local startups and local universities. We are also working with talking to several startups to take them global from Germany and obviously from India as well. So broadly, that's where we come from, and we are interested in all the deep technologies development that's happening around AI, cybersecurity, blockchain, mixed reality, computer vision, quantum computing. So all of these topics are of great interest to us, and we are seeing significant traction with both startups and with our clients. We'll talk a little more as we progress in this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Manjunatha. And I think people here listening in, the Düsseldorf Innovation Hub is something would be of keen interest to them. And also, I must give a shout out on behalf of the entire organizing team as well that Siemens Healthineers and Bosch have supported the Enablers Day, and this is why the ecosystem can thrive. We need the support from enterprises. We need those, of course, the startups need the paid POCs, and they need to, and that is so important, and to make sure that this culture of innovation continues to thrive and grow like there's no tomorrow. So the conversation, as I said, that we want to enable right now is about innovation, deep tech. How can startups leverage the various activities that is being done by each one of you? And Maren, you will also be talking to us about the smart city projects and other projects that are very critical towards the innovation ecosystem. So can I just play the roulette around here, and Maren will come to you, because you were talking about the startups, you were talking about the smart cities work and other healthcare work that you're doing. Can you throw a little bit more light on that, please, to the audience?
Yeah, first of all, I want to point something out, because I think it is quite essential to understand we are talking about deep tech. If you see the big brands out there, like the startups, like Zalando, but also Flipkart and others, you always see quite consumer-driven solutions. And I think in the round we have here, we also understand the power of deep tech solutions in a B2B environment. I think this is super, super interesting, because again, you could have a collaboration with a larger existing organization. It could be a large retailer, for instance, to boost your company. But I do believe that the people we have here in the group also highlight one of the big assets that we see, the very deep knowledge on technology, the high education provided, also like the high benchmark that is set on topics like AI, but also the opportunities that are there on a German level. So having companies like Siemens Bosch in here, and also Infosys, I think it's maybe a shift that happened in the past 5 years away from the first wave of innovation that was very consumer driven to a wave of innovation that is impacting larger organizations on a much deeper scale. And we're also talking about governments at that end. So what I'm looking into, and what I also see as great opportunities, of course, also driven by the green development and the sustainable development that we see across Germany, is a change in city environments, in mobility, in traffic. And I think it's super interesting that we have all these legacy systems. I don't know if you've ever been to Paris, or if you've ever been to Berlin, or like Barcelona has these roadblocks in the city center, but you also have these beautiful city centers with these tiny roads. And let's not talk about canalization or like pipes and electricity. I mean, it's a huge issue. So in many ways, I think our hands are bound to introduce new innovation in established environments. I think this is one of the struggles that I see, be it from a very traditional company, or from a kind of organizational point of view on a city level. What I see in countries like India, but also China, is a totally different approach, to work from the roots up. I also, by the way, see that a lot in the northern part of Africa right now, in Morocco and Egypt. While 5 years ago, everybody was looking into how to support these regions, you see that the opportunities that come up in these regions, and also especially in India, have a different level. I mean, we are not trying to bring the same technologies that we basically have here into other countries. I think you always have to adopt and understand the needs. And when I look into large-scale hospital or health projects, or also large-scale smart city projects, especially in India, I'm always blown away about the speed, about the intensity, but also, and I think that is very, very important, about the way it is adopted by not just the government, but also by the people. So I think it is, from my point of view, a very embracing environment. So smart city, to give you some examples, of course, data is the key to everything, to track and trace in a smart way, but also how to learn, how to understand the data. There are some very interesting startups also from Germany that, exploring entering the market. But I also, a couple of years ago, I was part of a delegation that covered Southeast Asia as part of the Asia Berlin activities here in Berlin. And we brought back like a startup that is working on completely new materials to set up a bike. And when we looked into that 5 years ago, so we were like, hey, how could it happen? And today I had a conversation with a startup here in Berlin that is building helmets out of mushrooms. So we came such a long way, and I just want to encourage all the startups to really think in new ways and different ways. And maybe if the market is not where you are based and born, explore new markets. And India for sure is a very exciting market. It's a hard market to crack, but there are a lot of programs right now that support German companies to look deeper into India, understand the market better, but also a lot of programs that help Indian companies to understand the German markets better. So I think a true open innovation ecosystem is happening right now.
Thank you very much, Maren. And you have been to Bangalore, you've been to India before, and we hope that we can welcome you and many more other German startups, community enablers, innovation leaders very soon back to our country and to our city. But thank you for that very enlightening insights. So now, Jürgen, the question that I would like to ask you, and this is on behalf of course, the startups as well. You work closely with your business units, and German standards are of the highest. So if you have to give a kind of masterclass kind of insight to the founders watching here from India and from Germany as well, what are the skill sets, what are the kind of things that you look out for the founders and the teams and the solutions that will make you want to work with them?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Maybe taking this from a couple of angles. First of all, I could say that from a technology standpoint, we probably actually wouldn't care what your technology basis exactly is, as long as your solution is helping the patient and our customers. I can say that generally. But of course, recently with the developments we've seen, and I understand we're sitting in a deep tech session here, then of course we also have seen that already now artificial intelligence, IoT, robotics, augmented reality, the approaches from Industry 4.0 also have a tremendous impact on our business and the way we build our solutions, and that's already happening now. So one way to look at this is certainly, if you're in deep tech and you're making an impact, then you're already in a very good space. And from our point of view, it's really interesting to see how our business in medical imaging, our business in laboratory diagnostic, and in digital healthcare can be impacted by the technologies, and which new solutions are out there that where there's really already a kind of proof that they actually help the patient, they help the customer. And that's not always so easy, but I would encourage every startup, especially if they're interacting with a big company, then they should already have made the first steps, interacting with customers, definitely shown the value. First sales maybe, of course that's good, but at least have a few interested customers that they can confirm that they're actually helping them and really create value for the customers. And what's also always interesting, and Maren just mentioned data. Yeah, for us, bringing in data in our ecosystem is even, I would say, even more important than in many other industries, because we always have to be careful that we don't base our solutions just on data from one region, because our solutions are supposed to be universal. Yeah. So we also need to include different solutions from different regions and mix and match them to be sure that when we have, let's say, for example, an oncology solution, that this really works throughout the world. And this is why we're looking really internationally at several startups in that area, to really see that we have a good mix and match. And if you can be part of that, even if you bring the Indian perspective into that, that's still extremely valuable, because we need to have the perspective basically from all over the world. And also the advice that I can give is really make yourself relevant, also beyond ourselves, for the big companies. Look at what they put out there in terms of their technology challenges, what is important to them, how you can match your solution to the corporate solutions. Because I see so many people making approaches with very vague statements. I have something that might help somebody, and coming to us with a very vague value proposition. So again, rubbing that in. What is it that you bring to the table in terms of how it helps the patient, how it helps the customer, the doctor? Because we are in the end of Siemens Healthineers, I can say still these days focused very much on business-to-business solutions, although we're opening up to be much closer to the patient. but it's really important. How do you help our customer? How do you help the healthcare system?
These are very, very nicely articulated insights, Jorgen. And I'm assuming, obviously, that when these startups work with you, because you're a global company, they will also be able to work on use cases, and globally they can access a lot of customers and other things all across the world, isn't it?
Definitely, I would say that's a necessity, that we also try out solutions that we find in India or another region of the world, that we also try that out with a customer in Germany, certainly, or with a customer in the US, because we always approach, I mean, all our solutions that we do, we want to approach globally. Yeah? It's important to us to also check all our partners with various customers throughout the world.
Perfect, perfect. I think this will be music to the ears of many entrepreneurs are listening in. So thank you so much for sharing this with us. Thank you. And Uday, Bosch is of course into so many things. I would just like to ask you about some very specific things. See, now the hot cases, at least in India, we talked about EV. We know that Indians want to have the best of appliances, and Indians want to drive the best of cars. As the pandemic situation is slightly different, definitely it's getting much better. So the consumer confidence is also increased. So how do you see the outlook around deep tech innovation, consumer behavior, and Bosch and startups? I'm sure you'll figure out how to answer that question. So over to you there.
Yeah, so mobility is right now what you call at the point where it is concentrating so many technologies into that small five-seater vehicle. You have consumer products entering the vehicle in a big way. You have electric concepts entering in a big way. You have the primary engine which has been transformed, actually it's disappeared, right? So what used to have 1,000 parts, now you have like one part running the way. So the amount of innovation and the amount of people trying to work within this four doors is staggering, right? It's like the whole hotbed of innovation right now. And as with all other technologies, the focus is on multiple areas, right? And one is, of course, to make the best batteries, or the second is, do we have the charging infrastructure, right? And the third is the entire user experience is completely different, right? So Bosch is investing into multiple areas that are along these lines. So we have folks who are working on the user experience part. I mean, it's been a cliched and often repeated thing that the car is the next living area after your house. Probably not in the last 1 year. Probably nobody used that. But going forward, I think that is what is also expected. Plus, there are business model innovations. So we concentrate a lot also on business model innovations, right? The entire art of selling a car, owning a car is no longer considered cool, right? So it is cool to pay for what you think you feel is worth, right? And so that brings into a question, what do you want to actually invest into and in which area? So it's a very difficult thing. And do you want to get your money's worth today, or do you want to do the long run, right? And look at business models where you look at only monetizing going from point A to point B. So we are working on different aspects of energy. How do I focus on energy? How do I focus on energy creation, right? Looking at infrastructure angles. And we're looking at how do we make it more efficient. So Bosch has put a lot of investments into building what we call as e-axles, e-machines, battery management systems, and the entire aspect of connectivity. And of course, the autonomous part is another big animal out there. So one is to be a component provider, which is where Bosch is tier one in the automotive industry. The second is to work on the primary aspects of energy, which can be applicable across different areas. So it's no longer okay to say I'll work only on automotive batteries, because the concept of electrification is hitting other areas as well, right? So we have innovations working on the battery composition side, the battery management side, the connectivity side, and of course the entire area of expertise. So we break it into multiple facets. One is the primary research, right, and the primary innovation. What kind of materials, what kind of subsets of this. Then you have, of course, the applied aspect of it. How do you actually, packetize the entire thing into an extremely small space? And then the whole aspect of how this data can be leveraged. How can I solve the problem of service, right? See, one thing is to build stuff. Second is to manage it for 10, 15 years, right? And to lay the foundation for it, lay a mechanism of operations that is important. People sometimes forget the angle that it's not the point of selling, right? Of course, it is very difficult to sell. Now, how do I maintain it for the next 5 years? Do I have the infrastructure in place? So innovation has to think through the entire aspect, what we typically call of a product from cradle to grave, right? So you need to be able to innovate on the entire aspect of it. So that's where we are concentrating on.
Thank you so much, Uday. And you said cradle to grave. Hope they don't get to the grave too fast and then they have a much longer life. But thank you for illustrating this very, very beautifully. and I will come back to you there. And I just wanted to think about this. When I come back to your circle, I want you to kind of illustrate to us. You are part of one team. Then you have Hemant who runs the Bosch DNA. Then you have the actual consumer, customer, and everything. So how does that parlay work, and what does the push-pull happens? I wanted to explain this to the startups really well so that they get trigger of their thought process and innovation.
Sure.
But now, thank you for that, Uday. Of course, now I will be talking to Manjunatha. And Manjunatha, I want Infosys. And yes, you said that you have been doing a lot of work with Germany. Can you also throw a light on the culture part of it a little bit, which will help the founders and entrepreneurs, number one. And number two is, how do you see some really phenomenal use cases from both sides, which will be inspiring and a kind of, maybe a guideline to the founders and entrepreneurs? If that makes sense, we'd love to hear your thoughts, please. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Vijeta. Let me start with the second part on the, say, use cases or areas of interest, right? See, as you can imagine, Infosys works with pretty much every type of business and every top enterprise in the world. So we cut across healthcare, energy, mobility, banking, insurance, retail. So you can imagine all possible permutation combinations are of interest to us. And as a consequence, even the so-called technologies that play a role in finding a solution for these problems are also widespread. So we look at AI, computer vision, sensor fusion, robotics, industry 4.0, blockchain, cybersecurity, you name it, and then they become part of our area of interest. And I think the use cases and applications are obviously at the kind of today at the intersection of both of this technology and these domain principles. As you can imagine, like Uday was talking about, within the four doors of the car, everything is coming together. Similarly, every solution that you can think of, a bank is wanting to put everything into it. Healthcare, insurance, retail. A retail company is wanting to put everything into their box. Entertainment, health, banking, and everything else. So, I mean, when I look at the possible areas of interest when it comes to use cases or topics, I think it just becomes too infinite because all of them are of interest to our clients and in turn to Infosys. But having said that, there are obviously certain areas of greater interest. So at a harvest level, let us say where we can already see a lot of harvest in terms of the use cases, we are seeing a lot of traction in the area of cloud and cloud management related topics. While cloud itself is not new, but the situation that we have is how do we help the legacy players to adopt to the cloud? Like Marlene was talking about, look at Paris, look at Berlin, look at those small streets. I mean, it's a very similar scenario when you look at the IT landscape of most of our clients. And being able to still give them the power of cloud is still a tremendous challenge to achieve it with reasonable investment, right? You can always think, let us throw whatever we have and somehow I'll become cloud native. That's not going to happen, right? So all use cases and topics of interest around enabling cloud transformation for enterprises will be of great interest. And these are like, horizontal pieces. This can be for any domain, etc. The second topic of great interest is this whole issue with cybersecurity. So our ability to address cybersecurity at an application level, infrastructure, network, etc., is always there. Now today, with all this Industry 4.0 and edge computing, edge devices, security at that level is of great interest. Today's security, privacy, and all this confidentiality aspects when it comes to data in general, and all the geolocation, geo-specific regulations, etc., how to manage, is a big area of interest. Now, the third topic I would say is from a technology area is the AI itself. And again, AI, even if I have to go to the next level of application, we are seeing enormous use in AI, robotics, technology with software with robotics for enterprises, robotics for home, robotics for retail stores, etc. We are seeing a lot of interest in the area of computer vision and anything to do with vision analytics, etc. So this whole mixed reality, again leveraging AI ultimately to have personas and experiences. So if I look at the use cases or applications, I would say these are the top three areas. If I have to look at the top three topics from a business or a domain areas where we are seeing a lot of traction, is obviously this energy transformation, because that is kind of touching pretty much every industry that is out there. So this energy plus this whole autonomous kind of mobility energy complex is kind of hitting every industry, you name it. So that's kind of, I would say number one on top of my mind. The second one, which is again transforming, is retail, because again that also has a footprint cutting across multiple types of businesses to interest. So anything in the area of retail would be of interest. So these are broadly the topics I would think is of interest, and I can deep dive into some of these topics if it helps. But from a startup founders and startups who are participating and who are looking up to large enterprises, I think these are the topics would be of interest from an Infosys, clientele perspective, and largely in a B2B kind of a world. We are also seeing some opportunities for B2C startups in this world, because we are working with large retail companies, large other marketplace players, and they would want to embed B2C kind of solutions within their own marketplace. So we are also kind of exploring those opportunities. Now, obviously, coming to this question of culture, I mean, it goes without saying there are very uniquenesses of different regions. And at least I have had the fortune to work with startups and agencies from different regions, whether it is Israel or Silicon Valley or India or Finland, Denmark, Germany, France, and we are very actively working with each of them. And there are, the very characteristics of these startups are very different. And the speed and essence and aggressiveness that you would see in an Israeli company is different from the modesty and the nuances and the detailing that you would see in a German company. And I'm just making a very global statement about these things, not to tell one is better or the other is not better, but certainly we see these nuances. And obviously, I think it also rubs off on what kind of area that they invest in. But all of them are obviously greatly innovative, and we are looking at all of these innovations for our clients.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So just it's 5:50 and we have about maybe 15 minutes or so, or maybe 20 minutes more. So what I would like to integrate one common question with some specific questions. So for example, the common question here would be, which I would like you all to throw light on, is What are the areas which are mutually of interest for both the countries, that is Germany and India, and what can be jointly co-innovated, which can bring about global impacts? See, we all know what's happening because of the pandemic and healthcare and air pollution, climate change. So many things are going on. Plus, there are opportunities in smart cities, etc., etc. So the co-innovation, co-creation aspect of it is something that would love to hear from each one of you. And then a little bit of specifics. For example, Marian, you're talking to startups in both the countries. What's going on out there? What are they thinking about? Are they collaborating or not? And Uday, what you should talk to us about, what I requested you, the kind of fit, like when so many pushes and pulls are happening, how does it really work out? So, I'm opening this, and Marian, we can start with you, like, like your insights and thoughts as well. Please go ahead.
So, I've seen a lot of very good startup to startup collaboration. I mean, maybe it's also due to the fact that Berlin is the home for a lot of founders from Asia. We have some very strong universities. I see companies, it's a small, very research-driven company called Nocturne, for instance. I just had a conversation with one of the co-founders. She is, I think, from Romania. Her co-founder is from India. They're developing a deep tech solution here in health tech, but they also came together in a university setting. So I think you truly see that education plays a very important role. You see a lot of expats also building companies. We have some very strong companies, successful, close to unicorn status here in Berlin, with a strong Indian aspect. But we also see individuals that really try to bring the ecosystems together, that worked in both cultures and kind of also try to make especially young companies understand what they get into if they want to expand into another market. I think what is interesting, and this is something that was also been touched before, like Germany in general is a monochronic business culture. If you look into traditional setups, so very rule oriented. But the startup ecosystem, other entrepreneurs are not very rule focused. We are basically so-called polychronic. So we are relationship-driven, ecosystem-driven, co-creation. We want to do something together. So I don't think that there is such a huge gap between the startup ecosystems, especially just because we also are trained as entrepreneurs to be this polychronic, open, collaborative. I think it's a little harder if you have a larger organization with certain structures that have a certain reason to be there. So this is something that I clearly see, but I can just say that on both sides, in India and in Germany, I see some amazing examples how collaboration could look like on a very personal level as a co-founder, but also across companies. For sure, there are challenges, but I also do believe that there are so many good role models that can explain also how it works, also in collaboration with larger organizations, that you should not be scared and nothing should hold you back. Like there's no reason to not, feel out and try to find out what opportunities there are, for sure. So I can only encourage. I know I'm very positive, but I mean, I'm also listening to the other speakers, give them wings. We talk about the David that needs the Goliath, there's a codependency on that. And we also talk about co-creation ecosystem and, cradle to grave, a long prospering relationship. I'm definitely feeling a lot of positive energy coming from that discussion from all sides.
So I'll take the cue from there. You spoke about positive energy. So I think that's an area that we definitely think is a nice, what I would say, collaborative topic that can be taken up between the countries. I mean, energy is right now one of the topics that every country is chasing. And that's an area which has multiple facets that can be worked on. Not just on energy. If you just take utilities as such, I mean there are topics around the water which are very looming in the distance, right? And then there's of course energy generation, energy consumption, efficiency, less dependency on fossil fuels. I think energy as a topic is a very hot area that should be worked on together. And to take on the question about how do we actually create this push-pull mechanisms, So as Bosch, what we do typically is we create focused portfolios. We call as Bosch search fields. And within these search fields, we generate projects that look at short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. And within this, there is a clear mechanism of what is it that we are strong at as Bosch, thanks to our experience and long-standing in the industry. And what are the areas we think we should have a dependency, or we should look for external assistance? What is it that we think we should be strong and process oriented versus where can we leverage the startups who come with speed, agility, and thought process? So we also have this concept of trying to bring in different perspectives, right? We talk about this concept of innovation happens at intersections. So if you look at the same people try to innovate in the same area, you always tend to miss things, right? It's like the frog in a well concept. You tend to become familiar with the well and tend to ignore things. But you get a new perspective. You realize that okay, you need to do something different. You're looking at it all differently. So so that's where the aspect of change comes in. Different perspectives. Get people on board who can challenge you, who can question status quo. It is very important, especially when corporate works with startups. You need to listen carefully to startups who will be questioning what you do, and not block them because they're startups, right? But try to look at what they're saying. So I think that's a very important aspect, especially when we're trying to integrate the startup cultures within corporates. And the key thing is also as a input to a startup is to work market backwards as much as possible. So one is to look at working on technology. The second is to look at also in parallel, how can I work to meet market demands? How can I bring in scale? Because most of the time you get to 80% and the last mile is always a challenge, because then suddenly there's a big gap. What I thought people would follow themselves and buy isn't happening. So there's a need to look at it. I think that's where the corporates can help to bring in the realities of market access, and so that that is integrated into the system. So I think that concept of push-pull that you're talking about is where the pull of demand from the corporate, and the speed and agility coming from the startups, and the reality checks coming from the corporate, and the dreams coming from the startups. So I think all of this is a very potent mix. There needs to be tension, right? And tension creates outputs. I think that is very important. So somebody should take over tension from this point.
Yes, everyone's waiting. Okay, Jordan, please. Whoever wants to go ahead, Manjunath or Jogan, anyone, please.
Jordan, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I can maybe connect to something that Uday has just said about working backwards and innovation. I just want to quickly underline this, and I would also say that startups shouldn't underestimate their strength in that regard. I mean, don't tell anybody from my company, but I sometimes see that startups can actually be much closer to the customers than we can be. They can be much more flexible, and the customer also accepts much more experimentation from the startup. Yeah? So if Siemens comes with a solution, the expectation is a different one than with the startup comes with a solution. And in a good way, the customer is open to experimentation with the startup. So you can try out the things with the startup, and maybe along the way we can work together to integrate a very innovative startup-y solution into our offering. And I've seen that a number of times, and actually I have an esteemed colleague whom I asked at one point, because he came into Siemens Healthineers with a startup, was what was the thing that changed for you most? And he said it was the business card. Yeah. So now I cannot experiment so much with my customers anymore because I come with a seamless healthiness business card. So, and this is kind of the, I think that is also the tension that Uday spoke about. Yeah. So we have to learn also as a corporate to accept this experimental mindset because it actually serves as an advantage from the startup. I don't know if anybody wants to build on that.
Sure. Thanks, Jamie. So on to that earlier question, Vijeta, I think on the collaboration between India, Germany, and where corporates like Infosys can play a role. See, I think this whole continuum, what Germany is obviously very, very good at is all this deep technology, skills, and knowledge, with their universities and institute like Fraunhofer. And our ability to translate that into new products and solutions is where I think the startups will start trying to fill that gap. And if the enterprises like Infosys and Siemens are already playing that role of facilitating it, but more importantly, we can do much more in terms of taking them to market. So one of the key propositions from Infosys and IIN and everything else is how do we help startups to become global or get access to global clients? How do we facilitate them to become successful with global clients? So I think if we can figure out a way to enable this continuum, the research, startup, global enterprises, connect with Infosys kind of organizations, I think that will be a good model for collaboration between Germany and India kind of setup. But I think these are at this point in time more geographical construct conversation, but the fundamentals will remain same. So companies like Infosys, Accenture, ACS, whatever you name them, they will have much more broader access to the clientele enterprises in the world. So if we can find out startups to work better with such enterprises, I think there will be a lot more win-win between these geographies and between the organizations which are part of these geographies, whether it's startup or large companies like Infosys.
Can I throw a question in, because I mean we are always getting questions from startups. Is it smart to actually partner with one organization, or can I, or is it kind of a burden at the end because all the competitors from the larger organization would not even talk to me anymore? Like, how open is that open innovation approach at the end? Because again, this is a scare. And the second topic that I usually have is, if you need a certain traction, or if you see a certain maturity level in the startup, so when is the right time to actually start communicating with you? Because again, it takes a while, I think, to also understand how larger organizations tick. So I work a lot with very, very early stage companies, and of course their big vision is like in a year or 2 years from now to partner with you, Jürgen, because I'm in healthcare as well. So, but then we always say, yeah, it's good to talk to Jürgen, but maybe you're not ready to talk to them. Like, what is the right time as well, and when do you want to listen or hear about them first, even if they're not ready? Two
right.
Completely different questions, I guess.
Yeah. No, so if I may take a stab at both those questions, right? See, number one, at least from Infosys point of view, what we have said is we are not making a binding commitment on our side, nor are we expecting the startup to make such a binding commitment, right? I mean, if at all we want so much of exclusivity, we would rather acquire them, right? So given that we are not necessarily acquiring them, it is fair that as much as I have open options to partner with different parties, the startup should have open options to partner with multiple players. So we are working with startups which have multiple partnerships with different SIs, with our competition, and so on and so forth. And we don't have any problem with that model until unless we believe it is so strategic that we have to own. Then it's a different relationship. Then it is not a partnership, corporate startup relationship. Then it's a merger acquisition relationship, right? So I think at least we believe it is better to be open, and also given the nature of the stage of evolution, I think it's always better to be open because you don't know how it is going to evolve, right? The second point is about this whole idea of when to talk, right? So today we are open to talk across the spectrum. So we have at least two classes we call mind share and the wallet share. So the ones which are slightly mature-ish, which are already market validated, product validated, are the ones we put in this category of wallet share, and then we talk to them differently. The expectation is very different from them. Our commitment to them is different. in terms of what projection that we do, how client engagement that we do, etc. Whereas the other ones which may be very new, we are talking to ones which are out of the university, which are like 2-3 people, professors and students have got together and put something on the board and then trying to experiment. So we are talking to those as well. But they come in a different category, what we call the mind share ones, wherein you're trying to create a new, what is possible exploratory view, both for Infosys and for our clients. So at least, I believe this is a reasonably open strategy, and I would think, it makes sense for large corporates to follow such a model. If that helps.
Yeah, I actually agree with the last point with regard to different companies on different level at different points in time with different expectations, right? If you expect to be integrated in Siemens Healthineers offering within the next 2 or 3 years, then you probably should be ready now to have a sellable product and already have first sales and so on. If you're happy with exchanging with Siemens Healthineers, working together, seeing if there's a mutual ground for working and what was called mindshare right now, then of course it's also good to be in contact if you're in the relevant field. I mean, with respect to the first question around working with competitors, so I would say that there's the top level and the personality answer. The top level answer is what I always tell my colleagues. We necessarily have to be open to every startup, no matter whether it has already worked with Philips, GE, or Toshiba, or whoever. Because I would even flip it the other way around. If I run into a startup that tells me I only talk to you and I will never talk to Philips and GE, then I start to think, what's wrong with you guys? Because either you're not relevant for them, so then why should you be relevant for us? Or you don't have the right mindset in a sense. Right? But then, of course, I mean, also in a corporate, and this is what people sometimes forget, also in a large corporate, you're dealing with people. So, specific persons that you need to basically have access to the corporation, they might have a different view on that. That this is an unfortunate point. So sometimes, I mean, I also run into colleagues who say, I would never talk to a startup that has already worked with Philips. Unfortunately, this is still a little bit the way it is. So I can think there's no general guides, but I'm totally convinced. I mean, unless there's some firm engagement in already investment or exclusivity deal, we should be open to work with every startup.
Those are definitely encouraging words, Jürgen. Thank you so much. And I think it's also our responsibility to foster this entrepreneurship and innovation at a much faster and lower level, right from colleges, academia, the incubators and accelerators that are focused on early stage. I think we can play a role definitely to do more on that. It is now 6:10. We are kind of at the end of this. So we are going to hand it over back to Studio Berlin and Julian. But if there's anything that any of you would like to share, a message out, very crisp, short, to the audience and to your, and whatever, please do go ahead. Please go ahead. Thank you.
I could just say whenever you are in Berlin, stop by. I'm very, very happy to support, and I hope the travel is possible soon. And I can welcome you. There's the Asia Berlin Summit coming up. I think I will see a lot of faces from India at that event as well, and that will be great.
I think there is conversations that November they're going to restart the international travel. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Thank you, Marian.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. I think take up large challenges, challenge status quo would be my message.
Yes. So to all the entrepreneurs, Indian startups who are working on EV, mobility, smart cities, etc., Bosch DNA, phenomenal program. You all must go for it. And of course, Jürgen, Siemens Healthineers for healthcare guys. Okay. So please, Uday or Jürgen, anything else that you would like to share? And I'll just hand it back to Studio Berlin.
No, just for me to say also thank you for having me, and to all the startups out there, do your due diligence, look at what Siemens Healthineers is doing, and if you think you're relevant for what we are doing, please reach out.
Fantastic. So thank you everyone. This has been a very insightful and lovely conversation. Thank you, Uday, Jai, Jürgen, Maren, and Manjunatha. And back to you, Julian.
Yeah, great. Thank you very, very much, Vijeta and Jürgen, Maren, Manjunatha, and Uday. So really great to have had your insight and your inputs over there. And also that really encouraging to all the participants there, because they welcome you to get in touch, to share your ideas with them, to encourage you to work with them, to meet them in Berlin. So, and of course, everyone is waiting for the borders to open, to travel again from wherever it's safe. And yes, I mentioned yesterday already, we had the first hybrid events already, so we're very much looking forward to more of these kind of events. For example, the Asia Berlin Summit that is taking place after 2 weeks.